Welcome everyone to the Miami Design District's LEED Celebration panel. My name is Jonathan Burgess, and I'm so excited to be moderating today's conversation. For those of you who are watching this who may be unfamiliar with LEED, which stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, LEED is the most widely used green building rating system in the world. It's available for virtually all building types, and it provides a framework for healthy, highly efficient, and cost-saving green buildings. LEED certification is a globally recognized symbol of sustainability achievement and leadership, and millions of people are living, working, and learning in LEED certified buildings around the world. Here at the Miami Design District, we started our LEED certification pursuit in 2011. So this has been 10 years in the making. And I'm joined today by core members of the development team, including Craig Robbins, live from Colorado. Welcome, Craig. Vincent Farot with L. Catterton, all the way from Paris. Welcome, Vincent. David Holtzman. Hi, David, joining us from Miami. And joining us from Washington, D.C., our special guest from the U.S. Green Building Council, Mahesh Ramanujan.
Hello, Jonathan, and everybody. Thank you so much for having me today. It is a distinct pleasure to be part of this fabulous ceremony.
Thank you for joining us. Now, Mahesh, since we're here today to celebrate the Miami Design District's accomplishment as the first built neighborhood in the world to achieve gold under LEED version 4, can you remind our audience, why is that a big deal?
First, let me congratulate Craig, Vincent, and David for achieving this LEED version 4 gold certification for Miami Design District, one of the most fabulous achievements that you can do for the world. So congratulations. So let's take this opportunity as a moment to celebrate your success by recognizing that I would like to virtually hand off the plaque to David for a magnanimous achievement for making this world a better place. Congratulations to you and to your entire project team, and particularly Jonathan for all your hard work in the past decade to make this Miami Design District a livable, healthy, and sustainable place for all people in Florida and a fine example for the rest of the world. Now, congratulations again. As you know very well, USGBC was established in 1993 with a very simple goal: better buildings equal better lives. Then we introduced LEED for buildings, which stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, as Jonathan rightly pointed out. But the most important part with LEED was we gave everybody a way to think about buildings than the traditional design and construction and really transform it to be better buildings. But then, if we want to accelerate market transformation on all fronts, we must focus on our communities, neighborhoods, and cities. That means we have to take the concept of LEED being applicable to buildings, to communities and cities, because after all, communities is where the buildings are housed. So we cannot no longer look at buildings as isolated structures. We need to look at them as part of the community, because at the end of the day, we are trying to serve the residents of the community. So LEED version 4, neighborhood development rating system that has been introduced by USGBC is the most rigorous rating system that focuses on a community level design, planning, and most importantly, implementation for both community and the buildings. So that is why it's such a big deal. It's a tall order. It's not easy to achieve. As you rightly pointed out, it has taken 10 years for you to develop this, which means that it is going to require a lot more rigor, a lot more planning, and most importantly, a lot more strategies to deliver a very simple principle: a higher quality of life for every resident of this community. That's why it is a big deal, particularly all of us emerging out of this pandemic. It's a healthy reminder that there is an inextricable link between environment, people, and economic prosperity. And that is why it's such a big deal.
Thank you so much. I'd like to take it back to where it all began. And I'd like to ask Craig, let's start first with a little known urbanist strategy called patience. You've been a very patient person, my friend. And for you, it started almost 25 years ago, acquiring property in the once abandoned design district. Thinking back to that time and maybe beforehand in history, what first interested you in that neighborhood?
Well, generally, I'm inspired by neighborhood revitalization and the whole notion of creating a sense of community. The design district was an amazing historical neighborhood. It was the most centrally located place you could probably be in Miami, both just sticking a pin in the middle of the map, but also the way that transportation works. So I knew it was an incredible opportunity. And I thought that doing this neighborhood building model could be transformative.
How closely does the district now resemble your original vision of the neighborhood back then? And maybe what's one thing that's transpired differently from that original vision that ended up being an important part of what it's now become?
You know, a mentor of mine was once doing an interview, Chris Blackwell, and he talked about the difference between seeing the Rolling Stones in the 60s when they were unknown, but having that moment of discovery and that magic, and then still seeing how great they could be in a football stadium with tens of thousands of people watching them. And I think that neighborhood building is similar. You start with quality and you just keep amplifying it. And so even though the first phase is small, it sets the tone for what will happen in the future. And I think in the design district, what we've been able to do is we began with this vision that we were going to merge commercial operations with culture. And we started in a small way doing that, and we've built on it every year. And we're getting closer and closer to being that band in the football stadium.
And Vincent, the partnership between DACRA and El Caterton began in 2010, which is around the same time that I got involved too. And from early on, I remember there was always a focus on good urbanism principles, on smart growth, and on sustainability. And from an asset management perspective, can you share with us how walkability, how human scale architecture, and sustainability play into your investment strategy, like here at the Design District?
Yes, I might like to say that for the Miami Design District, we embrace the idea of the 15-minute city, this 15-minute city that everybody is embracing at the moment. But in 2010, that's when we together designed the master plan, that concept didn't really exist and wasn't really prevalent. So maybe at that time we were ahead of the game in that respect. Since then, all our projects have adopted the idea of being able to service communities' everyday needs within a workable footprint. So we added residential, offices, retail, food and beverage, and many other services, which are all part of our projects and mixed-use project, even if it can come in later phases, as just Craig explained, that's the vision. On the walkable streets, I would like to highlight that it attracts visitors to the neighborhood, and it by providing safe, appealing, and comfortable street environments, the atmosphere, creating this nice walkable atmosphere. It also encourages visitors to explore the retail side while reducing the vehicle distance. And you can imagine that the attraction for visitors also leads to the attraction of tenants. So maybe I could also add on the human scale topic you brought, that it's really important to deliver both for the commercial success, but also for the ability of people to understand the neighborhood, the different scale and human size, walkability. It also responds to buildings that are not huge monoliths. And in the design district, for example, we use more than 30 different architects to design the buildings, whereas in other projects, it would have been something like 1 or 2. That makes a difference.
Oh, that's a great point. And we'll get back to architecture here in a minute. I'd like to focus a little bit on how carbon reduction and zero carbon goals, net zero energy, and renewable energy, as well as ESG, environmental, social governance goals, have become important metrics for many companies, including many of the luxury brands across the Miami Design District and the brands owned by your partner company, LVMH. How has this influenced your current and future development plans here at the Design District?
El Caterton and El Caterton Real Estate as an investor has recognized our environmental and social responsibilities. And we have implemented an ESG policy, internally ESG policy. Our investment decision process includes ESG due diligence to ensure that we are aligned with this policy. Looking at projects, studies demonstrate that green buildings can more easily attract tenants and improve the leasing and the sale prices. Green buildings and neighborhoods reduce energy uses, CO2 emissions, water uses, solid waste, which you can understand tenants with sustainability goals appreciate. The upfront costs are often offset by a decrease in long-term life cycle costs, and with lower operating costs, lower maintenance costs, health and well-being for tenants and customers, all are included in the equation to make it a success and a priority in the investments. I can also add that investors, they are valuing green properties. These green properties are aligned with their green investment portfolios.
Now, focusing a little bit on the urban planning principles that went into this neighborhood, David Holtzman, we had the privilege of working together on this neighborhood more directly for the past decade, and we've been so fortunate to be surrounded by world-class urban planners, designers, engineers, architects. And thinking back through all of those unique design teams, Vincent mentioned 30 architects, managing all those moving parts. While each few feet of facade may be unique, it all fits together seamlessly. How did you pull that off?
So, as a company, we've had the privilege of working with Wani Platter-Zyberg, one of the preeminent master planners, and they're based here in Miami. And we've worked with them on a number of projects. We brought them in 2010 to really look at the neighborhood and to conduct a master plan and charrette program. And typically a charrette is really looking at design and creating pretty buildings, but we brought the entire team in. And wanted to make sure that we had everyone that was going to be involved both in the design and the technical moments of putting the project together in the room and thinking about not only what does the project look like in 2010, but what does it look like 5 and 10 and 15 years down the road, and were we thinking about the future a little bit. We also had the challenge of working within an existing neighborhood. The design district at the time was about 80 years old, multiple other property owners outside. And so we had to weave our way and weave our program, in and amongst all of the existing property owners. And we're able to do that successfully. But it was really the team that came together and made that happen. And looking and thinking about sustainability, for example, we worked with Spinnaker and really thought about, how are we going to meet those objectives that we had, not only for ourselves and our buildings, and we were building multiple buildings at the time that were varying sizes, but we also needed to put a program together for our tenants. What was interesting to find is that many of our tenants had their own sustainability programs in place, and so they were, very easily able to work within the framework we had set for them.
Great, yeah, putting that infrastructure in place for the tenants makes it that much easier for them to accomplish some of their own individual goals during their fit outs and during their operations. So that's an instrumental part of LEED for neighborhood development. Mm-hmm. Another big part comes from the urban form that's offered up by the neighborhood pattern and design. And in this case, it was also shaped primarily by the city of Miami's form-based zoning code and the opportunity that came up with the district's special area plan. How did the formation of that unique district, unique special area plan unleash the potential of this neighborhood? And ultimately, how did it tie into the goals for LEED for neighborhood development?
So interestingly enough, DPZ wrote the city's smart code, which is called Miami 21. And so we, in developing an SAP, which stands for Special Area Plan, we're able to work within the existing framework of the Miami 21 language with DPZ and craft language and craft a program for the SAP that allowed us to create a a zoning and a design framework that was unique to the neighborhood. It allows us to look at the property as a whole in aggregate, rather than looking at buildings on an individual basis. And the advantage of that aggregation is that we can take our common areas, our open space, our parking facilities, and be far more efficient in sharing those resources throughout the neighborhood than if we had to look at them on an individual basis and meet all those requirements within each building. And so the impact in the neighborhood is that we have much larger open spaces, much better programming throughout the neighborhood through the SAP, and the ability to look at the neighborhood as a whole.
Great. Yes, the combining those synergies and focusing on master plan elements from open space, parking, landscapes, lighting, I think is an incremental part of the success of LEED for neighborhood development and how it helped the design district take shape. And as a landscape architect myself, I asked this next question for my fellow plant geeks. This project incorporated an enormous amount of investment in vegetation, trees on roofs, trees lining the streets, big trees too, 30-foot tall, with canopies growing over the public realm, entire rooftops planted with vegetation. Why was it important for you, Craig or David, to incorporate such lush habitat across the neighborhood? And can you describe some of the benefits of that early investment in green roofs and in shaded streets?
So the design district is an outdoor museum of art, architecture, and design. And for the most part, there are some historical pieces, but for the most part, it's contemporary. It's super new. And combining all of this very contemporary architecture and design with what are historical, almost landscaping objects, these 30-year-old indigenous trees, creates this incredible juxtaposition of something that's totally new, but it also looks like it's been there for a long time. And I think a mistake that a lot of people make is they go and buy these little plants from a nursery, these little trees, and they have to wait 30 years, and they don't really ever take the kind of shape that the landscaping and the design district has. I would say that with each element of what we've done, and Elk Catterton has been a leader in this and also an amazing collaborator, we've tried to aspire to the highest level of creativity to really innovate and do something new and something different. And the landscaping between the indigenous trees, the trees coming out of the oolitic stone, the whole feeling of the neighborhood, that's a fundamental component of what makes the whole experience. We've always said our goal was not to have stores where people would come shop. Our goal was where if you have a friend that's coming to Miami, you would say to them, you've got to go see the design district. And I think the landscaping is a big part of what makes that overall experience so wonderful.
Yeah, I think so too. And in addition to the landscaping, the architecture itself is iconic in many ways. And walking around now, it's clear just how much respect you have for iconic architects, Buckminster Fuller, Le Corbusier, and in their own ways, they're celebrated for their achievements in sustainability. And knowing that beyond the facade, no pun intended, architects are also shaping the air we breathe, the light we soak in, the resources we consume. And in your view, Craig, how can architects and designers truly celebrate healthy spaces and environmental stewardship while also inspiring beauty the way you have?
I mean, hopefully we've demonstrated that it's easy to do that. It doesn't mean it doesn't require attention and focus and drive, but it's something that is attainable. And I think on the issue of being sustainable, as I mentioned, we were aspiring to innovate and make a place that's special and that's part of the future. And I don't think anybody can stake a claim in doing something special and part of the future today unless they are doing everything possible to make it sustainable. What's great about this neighborhood is it didn't really materially cost us more. We're actually probably all in, coming out even or saving money, and we've created a sustainable environment. And that's something that we're very dedicated to doing. It fits into our plan for the architecture, for the art, for the landscaping, and also what these amazing businesses have done, how they've shown that they can be creative and work in this kind of environment.
Yeah, green building is just good design. And as we're talking about design's influence, Mahesh, projects like the Design District can really elevate this conversation about sustainable and healthy design. Now, what role does LEED play in that conversation about material health, about brand transparency, about clean chemistry and consumer and specifier choices?
By listening to Craig, David, and Vincent, I'm very excited about how the vision of LEED is being implemented in a very powerful way. And to your point, green building is good design, and it's about quality of life. So it's very clearly evident from your conversation. Now, bringing it to materials, how can we build better buildings? We cannot build better buildings without better materials. And we need better chemistry for better materials. So it's simple as that. And the good news is better chemistry not just changes lives, but saves lives. We all know that. So from that perspective, in version 4, LEED version 4, since the Miami district is certified to LEED version 4, we introduced a radical and a more bold vision of how we need to think about products, materials, and how we influence not only the architects and designers from a specification point of view, but also influence the product manufacturers to really come together to drive the next level of transformation. What does it mean? Is to deliver sustainable, healthy materials by always focusing on lowering the carbon impact. This is why we introduce concepts like the whole building life cycle assessment, or in this case, whole community life cycle assessment. The other one is really looking at environmental product disclosures, health product disclosures, so that you want to know what's in those products. Like you would go to a grocery store and you want to know all the ingredients in it. Similarly, you want to know the ingredients of those buildings and then be able to understand their energy footprint, the water footprint, the overall life cycle footprint, so that we can continually focus on how we can reduce carbon footprint while delivering sustainable and healthy materials back to the community and to the buildings is a balancing act. And it's a very, very challenging act also. So what we have done is that we have introduced some critical strategies, I would say most disruptive strategies in version 4, very, very high bar. And I am very pleased that Miami Design District has incorporated LEED version 4 and many of those strategies as naturally part of that requirement, and be able to deliver a very simple thing, is to deliver an extraordinary resident and occupant health. That's the whole objective. So what we are doing with this, that is, we are trying to raise the bar on what we need to expect from sustainable materials and healthy materials by focusing on transparency, by focusing on ingredients, and really transforming the upstream, not the downstream, of how we deal with it. We don't want to be recycling stuff. We want stuff that doesn't affect the environment. So that's the objective of version 4. That transformation has happened. And also Vincent kind of touched on this from an investor point of view. How do investors know that they have really delivered a full promise on ESG? They can only be satisfied with it when they can really show that they have balanced the generation of profits with being able to implement socially conscious values. And that starts with raising the living standard for all, because Miami Design District is not designed only for the people who are able to afford it, but it's accessible to anybody. And that's a big equity issue, right? So that kind of connection has to be brought in. And that's a very important aspect to remember when we think about these version 4 and LEED, and most importantly, the design principles that Craig and David and Vincent talk from both values and value perspective, that it's an opportunity for people in Florida, people in this country, and the rest of the world to really look at and say what you guys have done and how can we replicate this to raise the living standard for all. And I think that's what this is all about. And that's about brand, that's about values, and most importantly, that's about leadership.
Thank you. And to celebrate that leadership, we're here to recognize this certification as a fully built project. But the truth is, like any good neighborhood, it's still continuously evolving. And what opportunities should this team here focus on for their long-term performance of its existing building stock with an eye on resilience and continued health, of the design district as it continues to evolve, to grow, and to operate as a global destination?
I think you hit it on that pretty well, Jonathan. Performance matters. The future is performance. We believe, our theory is this: what gets measured gets done, what gets done gets improved, what gets improved gets replicated. So the most important part for me is to be able to really focus on the existing buildings inside the Miami Design District and start measuring. And when we say measurement, we don't need to take extraordinary steps. We take some basic steps. Let's measure energy. Let's measure water consumption. Let's track how the waste is going in and out of the district. And let's take the basic steps, because that data will give a lot of insight into where the gaps are, where the opportunities are, and most importantly, where you are making progress. And then importantly, we cannot underestimate the importance of indoor air quality. What I was pleased with all the conversation that Craig and David had about that vegetation that you clearly introduced in a very nice way, I think we are missing the bigger part. That's about external air quality. It significantly impacts the air quality outside the buildings, right? Not only inside the buildings, outside the buildings. That's a big and easy way. And also it's about carbon reduction. So it's the easiest way to accomplish that goal, which everybody thinks is very complicated. It's a very obvious thing to do. By good design, by good principles, and by good basics, we've been able to introduce that. So I think it's a big health story to present and project. So which means that we have to get deeper into this indoor air quality and really show that Miami Design District is truly a healthy place to visit, stay, and most importantly, celebrate. So having said that, to me, it's all about performance. It's about focusing on existing, and it's about continuous improvement. But also it's very important to focus on telling a story about what is happening today, what's going to happen in the future. And I believe you started this today. This conversation is about storytelling, because people don't get carried and inspired by data, right? People like data to understand the concept, but people get moved by stories. People want to know better examples that they can replicate. People want leaders like yourself to say that this is the direction to go so that they can easily follow. And most importantly, people want to learn from you and really come up with their innovation. So it's about starting a conversation about storytelling to deliver on the promise of leadership that you're all doing very well. And then being able to give it back to the community by saying, okay, now using this as a platform, innovate, replicate, scale. And that kind of activity could follow. So I think there's so much we can do, but it all starts with the basic principle of measurement. And it looks like minutia many times, but that's the right starting point. And we must focus on existing, because the future is existing.
Thank you for that. Yes, you can't improve what you don't measure, and LEED for Neighborhood Development version 4 is a good measurement tool to evaluate just the start of the success of this neighborhood long-term. And we started today, Craig, with your vision 2 decades ago, and we're recognizing that it's continually evolving. So what's your vision for the future of the design district?
I think there's 2 components that are important here. The first is that the design district is going to continue to grow. It's going to become more and more of a mixed-use neighborhood. We're going to have residential, office, hospitality, and all of that is going to continue to adhere to these principles, in itself making it more a 24-hour place, which by definition means that less people will have to drive to be there, and I think is an important component of sustainability. But also, we at Akron L. Catterton have learned a lot by doing this project. And you'll also see in the future how we apply these and new principles to doing more things and continuing to make a positive contribution to our environment.
And so with that, I'd open up the floor to any thoughts about the evolving neighborhood from David or Vincent. Any parting thoughts from Mahesh as well?
So earlier, Vincent talked about ESG. And I think you are well ahead towards making progress on the E front, particularly for this Miami Design District, because you've gotten LEED version 4 gold certification, the first certification of the world. It's a phenomenal lift. And governance, obviously, I'm pretty sure Vincent and team have their grips on it, and they're continuously improving and monitoring it, because they're managing risk and opportunities. But when we think about social, the social is an undefined chartered territory for many of the investors yet. They're still learning. They're still figuring out what is the best way to do it. Particularly, earlier we talked about brand consciousness and all the wonderful things. And good brands recognize a sustainable world is meaningless without an equitable world. So I am pretty sure Miami Design District will continue to, as part of the future continuous improvement and future design, you will build inclusive design features as you are thinking about continuous improvements, and also make this neighborhood accessible for all. And that's what excites me the most, because what we must focus on always is the intersectionality of sustainability, health and wellness, resilience, and equity. And all four of this applies to this beautiful Miami Design District. Once again, a LEED version 4 gold certified neighborhood development district in the world.
Maybe, Jonathan, to answer on the S, I
Please.
would like to say that 2020 and half 2021 was really a challenging period with everything we all had to fight, I will say. But that was also one of the best way to highlight what we do in terms of S and what we provide, what we offer to the community. I'm pretty sure Craig has even more example in his head than I will, but every event, every action that we implemented the last 12, 18 months with the community and for the community, it was really the best time just to make it really sensible and sensitive and visible. So it's a starting point, but we are doing a lot on the S for the community.
I would just add that every aspect of the neighborhood is about just making it accessible to people, about it becoming a center. Our parking is probably the cheapest parking in Miami of any place. So the people that come there can come there. We're working very diligently on also having enhanced public transportation. We've spent a lot of time and resources to have a train station there so that people can access it with public transportation. Most of what we do is open to the public and free. So the museum, the Institute of Contemporary Art, charges no admission price to go in. Neither does the Dela Cruz. The whole idea of the neighborhood is to be this sort of epicenter of commerce and culture where people can interact and enjoy themselves. And so I think it really is dedicated to doing that from a very high level, but the high level is about being sophisticated, about being creative, and about being innovative.
I think I would just add, I think we're always learning, and we're still learning. I mentioned earlier that when we started this, we were thinking about technology and thinking about the future, and technology changes fast and sometimes becomes redundant. And if we've learned anything coming out of this past year or so, is how we're thinking about buildings in the future and how we make those places healthier, both inside and outside, and places where our tenants and our customers and where we want to be and feel healthy going forward.
Thank you all. And I would say that as we end this conversation today, to Mahesh's point earlier, it's the beginning of a longer conversation of the evolving district, and how we are currently experiencing it will teach us a lot. And being a local, I have an opportunity to visit the design district very frequently. And every time I go, I learn something about what we've done, what you're doing. And I really encouraged to see that this thinking is going into the future with ongoing efforts and inclusivity being part of those. I'm really encouraged by that. So thank you all for your time today. Thank you for joining us, Mahesh, with the celebration here, and we'll look forward to that continued conversation. Thanks for your time.